Hi, it's Elaine, and this is Tales of an Entrepreneur, where we discover not only what entrepreneurs do, but why they do it. With any success comes setbacks and challenges. And in this podcast, I want to uncover those life changing events or those significant crossroad moments which change the course of how my guests run their business. We all face hard times, and I hope to discover the knowledge they applied to their highly successful business and what advice they can share with us today. Today's guest on Tales of an Entrepreneur is action coach and fellow of the International Business Coaching Institute. That's a mouthful. Stuart Wright. Stuart has started, grown, and sold several businesses over the last 30 years and has a wealth of knowledge to share with all of his clients. From being the managing director of a sandwich factory to being the managing director of a home ventilation and a home electrical service. I'm sure Stuart will have experienced every high and low running a business can throw at you. In his words, if you agree that life is too short for stress, worry, too much work, and not enough fun, then let's talk. Well, I'm all ears, Stuart. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Elaine. Nice to be here.
So is there anything that we missed there or anything that you'd like to add about, that extensive, successful career?
Where do you want me to start? I mean, it's you said 30 years. I'm embarrassed now to say that it's closer to 35.
Wow.
And it has been a journey. I mean, started my first business at 21
Mm-hmm.
with 26 quid and a basket of sandwiches. And, I've grown and sold businesses ever since then.
Yeah,
So I'm sure that I've probably been in the same, if not similar, situations to many of your listeners
absolutely. Yeah.
at some point in that journey. I'm sure I have. Yeah,
And so you started off with your basket of sandwiches and
that's right.
you grew that first business. So how did you
hmm
move on then into like the ventilation and the electric service business?
Okay, so for me, there's maybe one fundamental difference between the way that I go into business
Yeah.
compared to a lot of the people that I've met since I've become a business coach. I would say that the majority of people that I've met since I've become a business coach used to do the thing that they do now in business for somebody else.
Yes.
And then one day they had what Michael Gerber from the E Myth calls an entrepreneurial seizure, where they wake up and say, I don't want to do it for them anymore. I want to do it for me.
Yeah.
I was slightly different in the fact that I kind of realized at a very early age that I was completely unemployable.
Yeah.
So I had to run my own business. That's why I started so young. I was 21, straight out of college. So it wasn't really about the business, it was about the business opportunity for me.
Okay.
So I was looking for business opportunities where I was going into what I saw as a growing market.
Okay.
There's one exception to that, which was my jewelry business. I fell into that completely by accident, but I was looking for another opportunity. And I got into the ventilation business for the same reason. I spotted that there was a gap in the market,
Yeah.
and it was a very young market. So I knew that there was going to be natural growth throughout that through that market. And it was the same with the sandwich business. So going all the way back to 1990, the first company, as far as I'm aware, that started selling pre-packed sandwiches was Marks and Spencer's,
Okay.
and that kind of happened by accident as well. So in a Marks and Spencer's store, when they had their food stores, they had a canteen upstairs, and they used to create these pre-packed sandwiches for the staff. And one of the food buyers said, "Hey, these are great. Why don't we sell them in the store?" So Marks and Spencer started selling pre-packed sandwiches in their stores, and the rest is history. They started doing really, really well with them.
Yeah.
Then people started noticing this. I noticed it, and I started selling pre-packed sandwiches in petrol stations, convenience stores. Eventually, I got into supermarkets and all sorts of different venues as well. So that was the opportunity. With the ventilation, I came across a company called Envirovent, who were growing really, really fast, really, really well. with their ventilation products, and their products solved problems with condensation and mold.
Yeah.
I didn't even know there was a problem in the UK with condensation and mold, but I heard about this, and their marketplace was literally just social housing. So they only worked with housing associations and councils. They left the market completely open for private homeowners and private landlords.
Okay.
Now, when I heard about that opportunity, I thought, well, hang on a second. Social housing is less than 20% of the market, 80% of the market completely untouched. So I got into the ventilation business because I thought this has got to be a great opportunity. It's here, it's now. And luckily on both of those counts, I was right. It worked.
Yeah.
And I guess the lesson there is that sometimes you just got to be in the right place at the right time. And sometimes, as much as you can learn about business and learn from your own mistakes, there's always got to be a certain element of luck and being in the right place at the right time.
Absolutely. And we actually had a conversation this morning with another entrepreneur about kind of surrendering to the opportunities that are presented to you, following your intuition and not getting in your way too much. Would you agree with that? That sometimes we get in our own way when these opportunities present themselves?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, I now have the privilege to coach many successful business owners through their business journey. And if success in business was just about what you need to do, then we would all be as successful as we want.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we're human beings and we don't always do what we should do. We don't even do what we know we should do. And there's an awful lot of things that we don't even know that we should do.
Yeah.
And for me, that's all about, it's not so much about what you do that really gets you what you want. It's also about who you become. And who you become is about your skills. It's about your experience. It's about your expertise. Of course it is. But it's also about your beliefs,
Absolutely.
your values, your identity, and your mindset.
Yes.
So 100%, we get in our own way all the time as human beings.
Absolutely. Okay. And so you've led us quite nicely into my next question, whereas you set up and you built all these really successful businesses. What was the turning point where you thought, okay, I'm going to advise on businesses now rather than run them?
Okay. So I was the client that engaged a coach back in 2007.
Yeah.
My business experience had been very much about me. I did what I did. I did what I knew. I learned from my mistakes, of course. Everybody does. But I'd never engaged with a coach before.
Yeah.
And actually, if you took me all the way back to 2003, 2004, I probably wouldn't have even thought I needed to. And when I did, I'm going to cut a long story short because I'm not going to tell you the whole story about that. But when I did, it was transformational. It completely changed the way that I looked at business. It changed the way I ran a business. I got the business literally working without me, making great profits, and I was only having to work an hour a month. Okay, now that was a huge goal for me because
Absolutely.
when I went into the business to business in the first place, it was to give me more life. I was unemployable probably because I didn't like the idea of working 90,000 hours until the day I retired.
Yeah.
Working for someone else is hard, but it's hard for a prolonged period of time. Setting up a business is hard, but it can be a really rewarding experience if you can get that business working without you or create a passive income in some shape or form.
Yeah.
So in 2012, I found myself with a lot of time on my hands. And I spent 4 years having a lot of fun, enjoying myself. But I wasn't particularly fulfilled. And I remember it was a Wednesday afternoon in the middle of July. I was sat in my garden on a Wednesday when everyone else is at work, enjoying a nice cold beer. And it suddenly struck me that actually I needed a little bit more. I needed some fulfillment. So I called my coach and I said, you know what, this coaching has delivered an amazing lifestyle for me. It's great. I think more people should have a coach. Why don't more people have a coach?
Yeah.
And he was like, you're asking me? I'm a coach. You know, I think everyone should have a coach. And I said, I tell you what we're going to do then. I want to put a seminar on in our boardroom down at Hornbeam Park, and we'll get 20, 25 business owners in the room. You can just sit there, and I'm going to tell them my story about how coaching has helped me. And he was like, yeah, great. You know, that sounds fantastic, because he knew he was going to be the beneficiary of it if any of those people wanted to be coached. And as it happened, I really enjoyed that process of telling people my story and telling people some of the stuff that I'd learned and how it had impacted my business. And there was a lot of engagement, and I got a lot from that. I really enjoyed it. I thought no more about it, but as a thank you, he knows that I really like rugby union. He's a big rugby union fan. Unfortunately, he's Welsh. Can't help that. So we often go and watch Wales against England together. But he took me to a rugby match, and on the way he was getting into me about, you know what, you've got loads of time and you've got loads of knowledge and you should be giving this stuff back. Why don't you become a coach? And I was like, no, I'm not going to become a coach. I'm a business owner. That's my identity. Don't want to become a coach. But after a lot of wine and beer and all sorts of wonderful things that happened in corporate hospitality when they serve you all your dinner and it's delicious, I said, yeah, okay, I'll have a look. So I went to the Discovery Day with Action Coach about 2 weeks later, and I signed up and thought, you know what, this is a no-brainer. I do have to do something else with my life. I never wanted it to be a full-time thing. It's still not. I only really coach between 12 and 15 hours a week, but it gives me a great lifestyle. Last year I went away for 6 months around Canada, North America, South America. Tend to go away every other month for 4 weeks or so, and I can coach as I go. So it's a great lifestyle. But the important thing is that I still get to have my finger on the pulse of business, because I'm working with all these different business owners, and it's what I love. Business is all I've known since I was 21. It's what I love. I'm passionate about it. It doesn't feel like work. In fact, I get probably more pleasure from helping the owners that I work with achieve their success in business than I got from my own. So best thing I've ever done.
Wow. Just at a dinner with too much wine and beer, and it was the best decision ever since then. I love that. I really like that story.
Yeah.
And so, Stuart, like, it sounds like you've had a lot of crossroad moments. And this podcast is all about the twists and turns that life can throw at us, and those significant moments that change the path we're completely on. So could you share with us any crossroad moments in your life that changed everything from there on in?
Yeah, the very first one, the very first crossroad moment for me was when the catalyst for why I decided that I would never work for anyone else and I would always run my own business. And it was actually my father. So my father used to work really, really hard, get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, get home at 8 o'clock at night, one drink, and he'd be asleep on the sofa. And, you know, didn't see much of him. But he did all of that working for somebody else as a sacrifice to make sure that he could look after his family. And I had a lot of respect for him because of that. But he never really wanted to do it. He always wanted to work for himself. He had a great career. He was a managing director in a large company in London. But when he had that entrepreneurial seizure I talked about earlier on, he decided he was going to buy a small hotel in the Lake District. And I went with him and watched him try and run this hotel. And I realized very quickly, and so did he, that having a corporate job is very different from having a small business.
Yes.
And nobody teaches you how to run a small business.
No,
there isn't a course out there that, and it didn't work. I wouldn't say it was a complete failure, but he lost money. And it was the only time that I'd ever seen my father in my life in tears. You know, he felt that he'd let us down. That was a crossroad moment for me because two things happened. Number one, I decided that I would never work for anyone else and I would learn from his lessons and take those lessons straight into my own business and always make a profit.
Yeah.
and I've always made a profit. That's one lesson in business. I've always made a profit. The second thing was when I became a coach, the real driving force was still there. I never want to see anyone that decides that they want to run their own business. If they've made that decision and they've got the gumption to stand up on their own 2 feet and take their own destiny into their own hands, they deserve to be successful.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to see anybody struggle or fail because of lack of skills or knowledge, because the skills and knowledge are out there. And so that was a real driving force for me to become a coach, because I get the opportunity now to help people avoid some of those pitfalls and to make their businesses more profitable, more successful, have more cash, more growth, more team, help their clients better. And that's definitely, so that's always been a driving force ever since I was really young. It's not the only crossroad moment, but it's definitely, that was the catalyst that started me off.
It sounds like
There are others. There are other crossroads moments for sure.
Because I think when you mentioned the word unemployable, like that's a word that I would use to describe myself these days from running my own business. But to know that at such an early age, I was instantly thinking, I wonder where that came from. So that crossroads moment explains that perfectly, that you learned that at a very young age.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more, I think the longer you work for yourself or run your own business, the less chance there is of you ever working for anyone else.
Absolutely.
And I meet people all the time that have worked for other people and now work for themselves. And it's kind of like, it's really hard to go back.
Yes, I could not agree more with that statement. So your first big crossroads moments was learning from your dad's mistakes and understanding what you wanted from life. And you're about to tell us about another one. What was that?
The other one was, or the next most significant one was when I was offered the opportunity to have the biggest contract with a customer that I'd ever been offered.
Okay.
And that contract would have immediately represented 40% of my business turnover. The challenge with it was I felt that I was selling out.
Okay.
Because the products that I set out to make in my first business were absolutely exceptional, and there was nothing else like it. And that's one of the things that I've always maintained throughout business. If you haven't got significant points of difference, your business is always going to struggle, because how else are you going to sell your products and services to enough people? Is it going to be on price? Because if it's on price, what are you going to do? Cut your margin. So I always maintained that I wanted to have an added value product. And when I was offered that contract, it was on the proviso that I made products that they wanted me to make and white labeled them. Now, I'm not going to use this as an excuse because I don't believe in them, but I was in my mid-20s, probably about 26, 27 years old, and I took the money. And that was a crossroads moment, because that business then represented 40% of my business turnover, and it was more or less on a handshake. That the company that I was working with, they got bought out by a much bigger concern. And although I was given the opportunity to supply the products nationally, I didn't have the infrastructure for it.
Yeah.
So luckily, I was really good friends with the buyer. He gave me about 6 months' notice, but I knew I was going to lose that contract.
Okay.
The lesson I learned then was make sure that no one customer is any more than 15% of your turnover, because 40% is a lot to recover from when you've got all the staff wages to pay and the infrastructure that I built. So I had 6 months to try and change my business model. Now I changed it back to what I originally wanted it to be, but it was slower.
Yeah.
So the business struggled unnecessarily because I made that decision. So that was a crossroad moment for me. And I've seen it happen with other business owners as well. Sometimes you can be blinded by the almost, well, I'm going to call it vanity, actually. The vanity of that big contract.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that I suffered from vanity. And an important lesson that I learned from one of my coaches was turnover is for vanity, profit is for sanity, and cash is reality. And we all learn these lessons as we go along. And I wish I'd known that before, because I would have said no to that contract and I would have carried on the path that I was on, because the business was much more profitable with those added value products than the mass produced white label products that I went on to create.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does make complete sense. And what a valuable lesson to learn in your mid-20s in hindsight.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so I'm assuming that you've got lots of these moments of, building, is it 2, 3 businesses? So I
Three.
Get three businesses.
3 businesses, yeah.
So I guess you could talk all day to us about all these different crossroad moments and the hard and valuable lessons that you learned along the way. But do you think that all those kind of lessons accumulated, did they make you more resilient in business? Like, did you ever surprise yourself at how resilient you were in building those businesses?
I wouldn't say that I surprised myself in terms of how resilient I was. I think what probably surprises me is how unresilient some other people are.
Yeah.
I know that might not be the answer that you were looking for. I think that everything starts with a burning desire. If you really want something badly enough, you're going to do it. If you don't, you're going to find an excuse. And I guess one of the challenges that I'm facing, or have faced since I became a business coach, is the excuses. But that's okay, because it's my job as a business coach to call those excuses out and hold the mirror up to people and say, look, this is what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
I've never really been the sort of person that makes excuses. I've been so driven to the end goals that I wanted to achieve that I've been able to find a way instead of finding an excuse.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think maybe I've just been fortunate in the fact that I've always had that level of resilience. In fact, to be honest with you, thinking about it in more depth, when my back has been against the wall, those times have probably been some of the times when I've done my best work. And to be fair, I noticed that with a lot of the entrepreneurs that I work with through the lockdown.
Yeah.
There was so much panic, so much confusion, so much uncertainty when the lockdown first happened. People really had to think outside the box. They really had to start thinking. That people just got resourceful. There's a great quote: "There's no such thing as lack of resources, just lack of resourcefulness." But when that happened, I saw some people get incredibly resourceful, and their businesses are so much stronger for it.
Yeah.
So resilience is an important thing in business if you're going to be in business long term, for sure.
Absolutely.
And some people have a natural resilience, and some people have to build it. A coach is definitely someone that can help business owners or sports people or anybody else that wants to be successful in any endeavor. A coach is someone that can help them build that mental resilience themselves. I think I was just lucky that I had a fairly high degree of it in the first place. And I think that came from the burning desire that I had within me to be successful.
Yes, I think I would. I've wrote down on my notes here, I think it's the exception, not the rule, to kind of have that inner fire and that self-assurance. And it probably has got a lot to do with, the influences you had when you were younger. And yeah, it's exceptional. Yeah. Okay. And so everything that you've learned in business, running 3 businesses, running your own coaching business now, what what has that taught you about work and about life and how you approach it? You mentioned earlier about, taking time off and not working 90,000 hours. Is that the main goal, or have you learned lots of other valuable things along the way?
Well, I guess a lot of it starts. I believe that a lot of it starts with your values.
Yeah.
Okay, so my values. I mean, there's three, but I'm going to put them in order of importance.
Okay.
Number one is fun. Okay, if I'm not having fun, I'm not doing it. I'm certainly not doing it long term. We sometimes find ourselves in situations where life isn't fun. And, I have myself, but I'm not going to sit and moan about it. I'm going
Yeah.
to say, right, what am I going to do to change my life situation so it does become fun? Number two is freedom. So putting fun and freedom together, that's why I love traveling, because I find traveling fun and freeing. And then the third one is fulfillment. So doing something that gives you a bit of purpose and meaning.
Yeah.
The 4 years between 2012 and 2016, when I was really free for the first time, completely free, and had enough money to have a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun, but I wasn't really fulfilled
Yeah.
because, I was just, if all you ever had was fun, you'd get bored of it in the end,
Yes, you
because
would.
human beings, we want to give something back. We want something that's going to give us some purpose and meaning. So I think it all really starts with your values. And certainly, for me, I don't think anyone would disagree with me. You're not going to lie on your deathbed and think, you know what, I wish I spent more time in the office. We're probably going to say, I wish I'd spent more time with friends, with family. I wish I'd spent more time traveling. I wish I'd done more of the stuff that I promised myself I would do when I was younger.
Yeah.
Well, by that time, it's too late. We all have the opportunity to design whatever life we want to lead. And as long as we have enough resilience and as long as we have enough purpose, there's nothing stopping us from doing that,
No, there
apart
isn't.
from the stuff that goes on in here. And if that's true for you, anyone that's watching this, then my advice would be hire a coach, because that's what I
Absolutely.
did and it worked for me. And I know that as a coach now, that's what works for my clients too.
Yeah.
I hope that answers your question.
That does answer my question, that it all leads back to your values. So how did you come up with those values? Were you just sat having a cup of tea one morning and it was like a light bulb moment? Or did you really have to dig deep and kind of what am I trying to say? Dig deep and view your life and what you wanted from it.
No, I think if we all look at ourselves, many of our values are things that we've had since we were very young.
Yeah.
And sometimes we lose sight of them as we go through our adolescence and then start working, and life then becomes a bit more serious. We've got a mortgage to pay, maybe we've got kids to bring up, and we maybe lose sight of some of those values. But I think I've been fortunate not to lose sight of those values, to always want to have fun, to always want to have freedom, and to always want to have fulfillment. So no, it wasn't a light bulb moment. It was something that was in me right from the beginning. Now, does that mean that values never change? No, not at all. There's been other values that have come into my life, and I'm sure that would be the same with everybody else. And there are some values that empower you, and some values that keep you in a place where maybe you don't want to be. I
Yeah.
mean, one of the examples I can give you there is values about money. Who I don't know if you've ever heard people talk about difficulties they have with money and where does that come from. And so, for example, a lot of parents taught their kids that debt was bad and saving was really good. Well, yeah, but that's fine. But your parents, were they seasoned investors? Did they understand that there's such a thing as good debt and bad debt?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that blanket value about, well, save your money, be thrifty, don't spend it. That's sometimes creates some values and beliefs that don't necessarily empower an individual. So yeah, you can unlearn some of the stuff that you've learned, and when you learn some of those new things, your values might change. So yeah, I think most of us have got values within us that have been there for an awful long time, and then there are some other values that you learn along the way, and it's the same with beliefs. Values, I think, are tougher to shift. Beliefs
Yes.
can shift in a heartbeat, if you've got the right uh, reason to shift that belief, or the right push, or the right coach. Values are a little bit more difficult to shift, because those are things that are usually, I think, more ingrained. These are things that we hold to be important. We hold those things to be valuable. Whereas beliefs, we hold them to be true in a particular moment in time, but they can change in a heartbeat. I remember one of my beliefs changing in a heartbeat when my mother realized that I was probably too old to believe in Father Christmas.
Yes. When evidence says otherwise. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I guess when you're talking about money and our values about money, it's what was going round and round in my head was that money doesn't grow on trees. And that's what was said again and again when I was a child. So yeah, you instantly think of scarcity, don't you? That there's not enough to go around. Yeah, absolutely.
Which, as you've grown into an adult and run your own business, you realize that it's completely the opposite. Money is not scarce at all. Money is abundant, and the only scarce resource that we have as human beings is time.
Yes, I would absolutely agree with that. But I think, I guess, why I was digging into the values question is, I believe you that the values are harder to shift. There's something that we deeply believe, and it does tend to be just a pass away comment, maybe from an adult, but for a long period of time, you've heard that. But
Hmm.
I don't think I would have changed my view on it if I had not worked with people that had a different point of view on it, or I went out there and tried to source the information, reading money or reading books about wealth and things like that.
You're absolutely right, because I mean, when I teach this whole subject of values and beliefs, we actually refer to it as an iceberg.
Right. Okay.
What we tend to see above the iceberg, we think that results are driven by actions, behaviors, and decisions, but actually, what's below that iceberg, skills, your beliefs, your values, and in particular, your identity.
Yeah.
And the thing that shifts that quicker than anything is the environment. So if you suddenly, an environment isn't just necessarily, taking yourself from one geographical location to another. It's the people that you spend your time with.
Yes.
It's the books that you read. It's the information that you choose to spend your time gleaning. And the challenge is that if you stay in one environment and all you ever are exposed to are the same thoughts, the same beliefs, the same values, you're going to be blinkered. You're not going to be open, and you're going to have what they call a fixed mindset. Whereas
Yes.
what you're describing, you've developed is more of a growth mindset by exposing yourself to lots of different people, lots of different ideas. And so you don't get that confirmation bias that we get so easily but social media in particular is great for confirmation bias, because what you start watching on social media or listening to on social media is just going to be given more and more of that.
Yes.
So it builds up that belief and those values that you blinkered in. But if the more diverse the information, the more books you read, the more different people you spend time with, the more open your mind becomes. That's, I think, what you're describing.
Absolutely. And the more books you read, so that's quite a nice point. So tell all our listeners out there how many books you read when you first started your
Oh,
coaching.
wow. Well, I mean, it started long before. It started
Okay.
long before the coaching. And I'll tell you what the trigger was. The trigger for me starting to read books and realizing that I needed to was my coach.
Okay.
So the very first time I met my coach was when I just sold my first business. And I ran that business for 13 years before selling it. And we had this conversation about coaching. And again, I'm not going to use it as an excuse, but I was a young man. I'd done pretty well financially from the age of 21 to 34. And I kind of thought I knew it all. And again, vanity, ego always gets in the way of success. In fact, most of us probably need to commit egocide. And I've had to learn that lesson as well. And it's
Yeah.
very humbling when you realize you don't know it all.
Yeah.
There's a hell of a lot more to know. But he actually said to me, I remember saying to him, I don't think I need a coach because I've got 13 years experience in business. And he laughed at me, which was actually quite annoying at the time. But he said something really compelling, which was, actually, Stuart, you haven't. You've got 1 year's experience. You've just done it 13 times.
Yeah.
That was a life-changing moment for me. That was a crossroad for me, actually, Elaine, because I realized that he was right. I didn't do any personal development. I hadn't read a single business book, sales book, marketing book. So my life changed in a heartbeat in that moment in time. My beliefs about myself in a heartbeat changed in that moment in time. It was a great lesson. And I started reading books on all sorts of different subjects. And I set myself a goal of one a month. And it was probably, in the early days, it was about one a fortnight.
Yeah.
That's a lot of books.
It is a lot of
Now,
books.
the thing is, but what's really important to get across, I think, here is, have you ever listened to a song, on the radio, or someone was playing a song and you really loved it?
Yes.
Has that ever happened to you?
It has, yes.
Did you listen to that song just once, or did you listen to it again and again?
No, it usually gets put on my playlist to repeat. Yeah.
Exactly. So with the books that I've read, reading one every fortnight sounds like it was just about reading lots and lots of books. Actually, some of the books that I've read as many as 17 times.
Wow.
Because they were so flipping good and I learned so much from them. And it's really difficult to learn it the first time round, especially if you do audiobooks.
Yeah.
Because, you listen to something on an audiobook and you think, wow, that's incredible. And your brain starts to think, how am I going to implement that in my life or in my business? And while your brain's doing that, you're not listening to the next chapter or the next important point. So I've re-listened, and I've absorbed that information and implemented it. It's no good reading a book and you think, this is amazing, I'm learning so much from it, and then doing nothing with it.
Yeah.
Because, you may as well have read Lord of the Rings. So all these books that I've read, I just absorb them and take the information and think, how am I going to use that in my business and life? So it's not just about the volume of books; it's about the depth of reading that I've done. Do you know what, Elaine? I don't know if you know this, but there is actually a book called How to Read a Book.
Is there? No, I did not know that.
There's a book called How to Read a Book. I can break it down for you, really simple.
Okay.
My recommendation would be, whether it's audio or a physical book that you're reading, read for 30 minutes and then stop. And then journal, write for 10 minutes the thoughts that you've got about the 30 minutes you've just heard or read.
Yeah.
And then tell someone else about it for 5 minutes.
Okay.
It's going to change the way that you learn from those books, and it'll change the way that you implement the stuff that you learn. It's amazing.
Okay.
So
wow.
There's something that I learned as well. It's a great way to read a book.
That is a great way to read a book. Yes, thank you for that. I will definitely be implementing that this week. Okay, Stuart, last question. Are you ready? So From everything that you've learned, all of your businesses, all of your crossroads moments, all of the knowledge that you've gained, what is the one piece of advice that you would give to all our listeners out there?
And that's really, really easy.
Okay.
So the one piece of advice that I would give everybody is work harder on yourself than you do on your business.
Okay.
Your business will only ever grow and rise to the level that you are, your skills, your knowledge, your beliefs. If you work hard on your business, you'll make a living.
Yeah.
If you work hard on yourself, you'll make a fortune. And you'll have an amazing life of fun, freedom, fulfillment, with family, friends, doing whatever the F you want.
That is a brilliant, brilliant way to finish up this episode. I feel pumped and ready to take on the world. That is some really valuable advice, Stuart. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing your story and all of your crossroads moments. And if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that, Stuart?
The easiest way to get in touch with me is just dropping me an email. It's really easy. It's stuartwright@actioncoach.com.
That's wonderful. Okay. Thank you so much for your time.